Hi guys, Andy N, Spoken Able, back in the house on a Sunday evening. And it's pissing down, so it's a good job to be actually on Zoom tonight doing a podcast. So, no, we're local today as well. We've got a young gentleman with me who's become a bit of a regular at Speakeasy recently. And he's been an incredible writer, one of the best one writer I've come across for ages. So, it's a gentleman called Michael Burton. Now, I'm going to say nothing else. I'll let Michael introduce himself, and we'll start from there.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Andy. Great to see you again. Yeah, so I'm Michael Burton, and I live in Manchester now. I've been performing around Manchester as well as trying to get things published in different places. And I recently came back to Manchester after living in Beijing for a long time, for almost 8 years.
Yeah, that's you caught me out with that because I never asked birthday age, but I wouldn't have put you down for being that old. So we were up there for 8 years. You're going to break your face, mate. So, yeah, so obviously, we'll come on to China in a minute. I want to ask you all about that but I know you're originally from the Bake-Up area, weren't you? So,
yeah.
And where did your creativity come from originally?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I should probably mention, first of all, is that my dad is a poetry writer and a poet. He sort of started off writing after he retired. He was a primary school teacher, and he retired. He had to retire early. He had a sort of an issue with his back. Had to retire early, and he sort of was looking for things to do, I think, and took up poetry, and was very successful at it. Really, he got lots of things published and that kind of thing. I think when I was growing up, I was a bit like most children, you don't think what your parents are doing is particularly cool or anything like that, but it certainly planted a seed. And as I got older, I sort of appreciated what he did and poetry itself, and I read poetry and enjoyed it. So yeah, he definitely planted the seed in me as a possibility. And I should also say, in fact, my brother is also a writer. He writes fiction.
Wow! Wow!
And he's also got several books of fiction. Is a novelist. He has a podcast called Ragbag Presents, which kind of feeds into his novels. So yeah, I had plenty of role models growing up.
Certainly that one, yeah. And it's obviously worth knowing. Obviously, I've always said this for chat people and spoken late, but I always do my research, and I knew about your dad already being a poet because. Nothing to hide in this. You're going to be an obviously Amanda, my wife's forthcoming charity book next month in January, and I knew your dad was. And I said to you before, jokingly, I said like you obviously told your dad about it. Your dad sent a submission in, and Amanda asked me, "Is that Michael's dad?" I said, "I don't know." Well, I certainly didn't know about your brother being a novelist as well. So, but I mean, I think you've got that sort of thing there, haven't you? Then when it's in your genes or your family like that, you're going to be carrying on some degree or another, aren't you? Then so that way, yeah.
I think when you're growing up, if you know it's a possibility, a lot of people, I suppose, don't ever think about writing or that kind of thing. And very talented people, who don't necessarily think of it as a possibility. But if you have two people around all the time who are doing it and telling you about getting published or getting things out there, you learn quite quickly.
Yeah, you do. I've got a nephew who's like that. He's 14 and a half, and he started writing rap metal lyrics, which are like eye-opening, to put it nicely. So yeah, I know what you mean with that straight away. So, but like I said, it's you said before you've done a bit of traveling around. So I know you were living in China, weren't you, or Beijing for 1.8 years. Tell us about that experience then.
Yeah, well, I really loved living there. I lived in Beijing for the whole time, really, but I was teaching English, which I had done in a couple of other places before that. And yeah, I really liked the place. And compared to other places I'd lived before, it sort of stuck with me a lot more. And then I moved into other work, but also in Beijing. And yeah, it's a great place. I mean, people are great. The culture's really interesting. I learned some of the language to a certain degree, and food's obviously fantastic as well. It's a great place to live. Yeah.
Did you manage to write poetry in Chinese?
No, to be fair, and also I tried to sort of appreciate Chinese poetry, but yeah, it's pretty hard to penetrate.
Yeah, I know one or two Chinese poets, and it's interesting. It's nice, that's been nice, lovely people. I'd struggle with it as well, definitely. So now you've got an alias going around, right? Your poetry, obviously, and this leads into two things. People may know you under the name of Not Another Poet. Now, where did that alias come from?
Yeah, it started actually in Beijing. I was performing under that name a lot more. I haven't been using it in Manchester, but it's still my Instagram handle. I kind of I found myself writing poetry under sort of two personas. I felt like Michael Burton and Not Another Poet was a bit more sort of musical, I suppose, and a bit more kind of direct and a bit more performance based. So it's certainly Not Another Poet is sort of a much more performance based poetry.
Yeah, I've heard a number of material like it's very, very different. It's very good, but you can tell it's you in a very, very different way straight away with that. So, which kind of leads on really to obviously your band you referred me to, New Age of Decay. So tell us about that then, because this is I played your album that one. I thought it was an excellent album. It was like it wasn't what I was expecting actually, but I really enjoyed it. So
yeah, well, this also started in Beijing, and I was part of an arts collective in China, particularly English language fiction art and poetry, called Spittoon. It runs in a few cities in China, and we had this initiative of sort of it's run by a guy called Matt Burton, who's returned to the UK quite recently.
Oh, I know Matt. I know Matt. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I know
Matt.
No. Matt knows his brother used to be in the band. Played the guitar in the band I was in. God, I know. Yeah. I'm sure my age now. I didn't know you knew Matt actually. Oh, God, it's a small world.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, I met him in Beijing. Yeah, it's a very strong world. Yeah. But I know he also used to perform around Manchester as well. But he, so he had this idea of sort of getting musicians and poets together as a kind of one-off collaboration. We kind of did a one-off sort of gig. But me and the musician Dan Gamer, who he goes under the name The Slow Blade, we just really hit it off really, and we enjoyed it so much that we started performing around Beijing in different bars and different places.
Oh, right.
And then it sort of grew, and it started off with just poems that I'd written without nothing to do with, I didn't really know what to do with them. And then he put music to them, and I thought they improved them a lot. And then afterwards we sort of worked on, he had music, I had poetry, and we sort of collaborated, and it worked out really well. We were really on the same page, I think. So
yeah, you can hear me hear the album, because it's really, really interesting album itself. Because I'm of the opinions with poetry. I've done a couple of, already. I've done a couple of bands myself where I've had music back in the poetry, where either I've been the poet or the musician. So both really. And they always say something that poetry can be a bit 1 or 2D sometimes, can't it? And with music, it can really fill the sound out a lot more.
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't obviously work with not every. Well, perhaps no poem should need music, but certainly some poems certainly are helped, and create something completely different. And I think that I've listened to your stuff and definitely feel that as well. That you.
Yeah, you do. It's like it's a great album, and I could actually base it about bits and pieces at the tracks, but I'd rather people just hear it really. So, what was the recording process for this like then? Was it almost done remote then, was it? Or do you actually work this out? Is sat next to each other sometimes?
No, well, I sort of knew I got a job in the UK, but it was during the pandemic, and the company allowed me to have a sort of 6 months before I took the job. So I had this sort of 6 month that I knew I was leaving Beijing, and I knew I was coming to the UK. And so we sort of I sort of called him and said this, and we sort of said we might record our album, but then I thought, well, now I'm leaving, we better do it. So we knew a record company called Nugget in Beijing, which is sort of an indie sort of recording studio, and he has a sort of music label called Daft Pop, and so we were able to do it. Really, it was a bit of I think once you have a goal, you can do it, can't you? Sometimes you kind of put things off and you think we'll do it in the future, but when you say I'm leaving, we better do it, then you sort of get your ass into gear, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like I've done collaboration of the world, but I know what you mean. Where the situation you're in there, it's given a case of, so you can argue it's now or never, really, isn't it? So
yeah,
because if you leave, if you don't, when you move back to England and stuff, and need to be based in China, it'd be a case of it maybe a struggle to get more recordings done. So I think it's harder trying to do remote over internet in another country. Certainly, no, excellent. It's a great album. Worth checking it out. Certainly, so
yeah, we're looking into doing one. We've got a few things we're working on that we might be recording remotely, but it is difficult, isn't it, to work, because you sort of help each other by playing together. You sort of tweak a lot of things. Whereas
you do like it
harder to do it remotely.
I think it was when you were at Speakeasy on, just get us around our October show, and we had a young lady there called Polly there. And Polly's a good friend of mine, and she lives in Huddersfield, and we're remotely doing a band at the moment. We are, so it's like she's sending me vocals over, and I'm sending her rough bits of music and ideas back, and we're bouncing it backwards and forwards. But yeah, it's still a different ballgame. I think if it's sitting down and working stuff out bit by bit together sometimes. So yeah, the collaboration process is very, very different indeed. So, but anyway, I want to ask you about we should be able to give you poetry, much to talk about today anyway, because I know you've had quite a bit of stuff published on some really good places as well, like the Interpreter's House and the Honest Ulsterman, both of which have published stuff of mine before as well. So both are really good magazines and stuff. So is this the direction you think your work's going to go into, or would you think in the future you may end up doing a live show or something?
Yeah, I've definitely got an ambition to sort of write some sort of collection, and I think that's why I've sort of got this Not Another Poet persona, because it's sort of I like to separate those two things, I think, and try and do both if I can. Or I don't know what I would ultimately prioritize if I have to, but I'd quite like that to exist as these two different things. And a lot of the stuff I'm sending out to magazines is the things that I'm intending to hopefully be part of a written collection. And then the other things I'm is more performance based as well. So
yeah, there is a big difference between performance based and page poetry, and I find that because that's why probably I'm really on to flash fiction nowadays and performance stuff, so I can get away with more on the flash fiction side than what I used to do with the poetry. Poetry I used to be in series on all the time, so which is a bit of not me, if you know what I mean. So, but no, I agree completely with that. So
there's definitely things that sort of meet in the middle and are good for performance and for the page, but they tend to be one or the other for me, I think.
Yeah,
or I treat them that way.
Yeah, with you in other countries, then have you actually performed your poetry in other countries, or has it mostly been in England?
Yeah, I sort of started performing regularly in Beijing. Actually, I did do a couple of things in England when I'd been visiting back and with my dad as well. But yeah, I did kind of start performing regularly in Beijing. There was a monthly poetry night in a bar in Beijing that I used to go to almost every
month. Tell us about that then, because it's never somewhere I'd been to before. But how was the circuit over there, if that's the right word, even?
It's a good circuit. I mean, it's obviously a lot scaled down from somewhere like Manchester, but obviously it's an English language poetry night. So, but you do actually get you've got a lot of very good poets. There's a guy called Anthony Tao he runs the poetry night still, and Abigail Weather. So me and her used to have a kind of poetry workshop that we used to run. And these are all done, as I said, this Matt Burns collective, the Spittoon. So there's a lot going on. They're very active, very, very passionate people. One good thing is that people come from all sorts of different places, so you get a lot of variety in terms. You get Americans, Australians, British, Irish, and then also people do performing in the second language as well. So it's
fantastic!
Yeah, it's very good. So it's on the last Thursday of every month. I believe it still is.
Fantastic!
It's a bar that used to be called Camera Stylo, which has recently changed its name to the Sugar Cafe in Beijing. So if anyone's going to Beijing, then you should check that out.
Check it out, yeah. We'll give you a shout, Nick. You can tell them where it is. I thought, that's tremendous. Yeah. So like it's, I said that's what I find interesting. Like we're trying to draw a comparison between doing reading in another country than reading where you are. It's like I've been up and down England and stuff. I've done tour Ireland twice, and they're like the Irish ones are incredible. But I'll tell you about that another day. But like doing it in another country is a completely different experience. It's probably takes out your comfort zone, really, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, I think so. And you're obviously, it's definitely different. I mean, I suppose most people in Beijing, because it's such a small, it's not really, we couldn't even really call it a circuit, you know, it's a small group of people who do it. But it did get, it certainly got popular after the pandemic. So in China, when things started opening up again, there was definitely a big, we used to have like quite big crowds really for something that you'd think would be so niche. Did attract quite a lot of people.
You can argue with, like in Manchester, we're both are, like the poetry circuit on there. You can argue that's a niche market, but certainly post lockdown, it's basically boosted up in massive volume. There's lots of new nights coming up. Like I know you got in contact with us over at Speakeasy what about a year ago now, or 6 months ago was it anyway? So
yeah,
that's why.
Yeah, in those 6 months, I've definitely every week I hear about another new event. It's so much going on in Manchester. If I was so organised, I could be performing probably every week somewhere.
Or it's not the stage where not every night, but certainly you could be out performing 2-3 nights a week if you wanted to.
Easily. Yeah.
We both know people I know that are doing that at the moment, and respecting them definitely with it, mate. So right, anyway, so okay, we'll start wrapping up this potato. I want a couple of quick things to finish up with. Okay, so people always ask me sometimes when you're hearing you point the address that may not know the first time. Do you have any sort of regular recurring themes with your work?
Yeah, perhaps. I'm not sure it's very clear in my work, but I suppose with Not Another Poet stuff, it tends to be quite, I wouldn't quite say political, but it's kind of about society or society's problems, or kind of, it's not very personal about the individual person, whereas Michael Burton, the poetry that's under the name Michael Burton is usually slightly more personal. I wouldn't say kind of confessional, but more about the human experiences, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Because I've said before, I played your album back. Your album is, I think you're right. I've never used the words political, but you're raising a lot of points that I've not seen you do live as Michael Burton. That's the best way to put it to you.
Yeah.
I think your poetry as Michael Burton certainly is more thoughtful. I think it's, each time I've seen you read it, you left me after thinking, yeah, that's a really good point. So great stuff. Now, I'll say, like I said before, you're looking at perhaps a book in the future, aren't you, as well? Then, so would you contemplate doing a solo poetry album even?
It's a good idea. I'd like to see the possibility of that. And if there's appetite for that. But yeah, I should say actually that the musician Dan Gamer, who I was with in Beijing, is actually going to be moving back to the UK in next year. So we might
that makes life easier straight away.
That might help as well. So I do enjoy the music with poetry.
Could you see yourself touring this album or any future recordings?
It would be great. It would be great if possible. Obviously, we both, would certainly. I can certainly say we both enjoy performing. So if that was doable, definitely.
No, fingers crossed, you're definitely on that one, mate. All the best of it straight away. So, right, the last thing I've got to ask you here is, and before we get you go do the plugs people can find you, is it's not been revealed this online yet, and I'm gonna out you now. But this podcast is going out just before you come and host Speakeasy for us in January 2023. So I know you spoke to Steve about this, who's my colleague and man's colleague in Speakeasy. So have you done any hosting before?
I said I did in Beijing. I used to host this poetry workshop.
Oh, you hosted the workshop, right?
But not really. That's a bit different though. But so I haven't actually hosted a open mic before, so it'll be first time. So I'm very grateful for the to get the opportunity. And look, yeah, should be good.
Well, come along and watch us in January, everybody, because Michael's going to do a great job of it. I'm sure of that. Because don't worry, me and Amanda will be around pulling faces at him every chance he's on stage, trying to put him off. No, brilliant, mate. Now, obviously, if people want to find out more about you, Michael, where do you recommend they go to wrap up with?
Yeah, well, in terms of my work, as you said, it's been published on the Interpreter's House and the Honest Ulsterman Pennine Platform. There's if you go to my Instagram, so NotAnotherPoet.mjb, you can find a link tree that has a lot of stuff that's been published in different places, and a few other podcasts have been on. For my music, that's also in that link tree you can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, and we've got 2 music videos on YouTube for 2
have you? I didn't know that. I'll check that one out, definitely. So I'll be listening. People wondering who I heard it all on Bandcamp, so I'm a Bandcamp fan. So
and it's on Bandcamp as well. Yeah, that's where it was originally, but we've now got it onto other platforms that more people use. Yeah,
brilliant. Okay. Well, we'll wrap up this part 1, Mike, and we'll be back in 2 minutes, everybody. You can hear some of Michael's work. So see you all in a minute.